Imagine standing on the deck of the most luxurious ship ever built. The ocean around you is freezing cold. The sky is filled with stars. Everything feels calm, peaceful, beautiful. But beneath your feet, the ship is slowly dying. And the terrifying part is this: most people on board the Titanic had absolutely no idea they were about to face one of the deadliest disasters in history. Some passengers were laughing. Some were drinking tea. Some were listening to music. And in less than 3 hours, more than 1,500 people would lose their lives in the dark Atlantic Ocean. Today, we are going to relive the final minutes of the Titanic, minute by minute. Not like a movie, but like real history. So close your eyes for a moment, and imagine you are there. Because once this story begins, there is no escape. The Titanic was not just a ship. It was a symbol of human pride. At the time, it was the biggest and most luxurious ship ever created. People called it unsinkable. And honestly, many believed that. The ship had beautiful dining halls, luxury rooms, grand staircases, and everything people could imagine. For rich passengers, Titanic felt more like a floating palace than a ship. And for poor families traveling to America, it represented hope. A better future. A new life. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic left England carrying more than 2,200 people. Men, women, children, workers, dreamers. None of them knew they were sailing directly toward disaster. Now here is something very important many people don't know. Before the Titanic hit the iceberg, several warnings were already sent to the ship. Nearby ships reported dangerous ice fields ahead. But Titanic continued moving at high speed. And that night, the ocean was unusually calm. No waves. No wind. That might sound normal, but it actually made the iceberg harder to see. Usually, waves crash against icebergs and create white foam. That foam helps sailors notice danger in darkness. But on this night, the sea looked like black glass, and the iceberg blended perfectly into the darkness. Then came the moment that changed history forever. 11:40 p.m. Two lookouts standing high above the ship suddenly saw something directly ahead. A giant iceberg. Silent. Dark. Deadly. One of the men immediately rang the warning bell 3 times. Then he called the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. The officers reacted instantly. They ordered the ship to turn. The engines reversed. But Titanic was too large, too heavy, and moving too fast. Within seconds, the iceberg scraped along the side of the ship. At first, many passengers barely noticed anything. Some even joked about it. Others stayed in their rooms calmly. But deep below the ship, workers heard the sound that would seal everyone's fate. Water pouring in. Fast. Very fast. The iceberg had torn open multiple compartments inside the ship. And Titanic was only designed to survive flooding in 4 compartments. But 6 compartments were damaged. Which meant one thing. The ship was going to sink. And at that exact moment, the fate of the Titanic was sealed forever. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, inspected the damage himself. He walked through the lower decks as freezing water rushed inside the ship. Mail rooms were flooding. Workers were trying desperately to control the damage. But Andrews already understood the terrifying truth. The Titanic could not survive this. When he finally returned to Captain Edward Smith, his face looked pale and hopeless. And then he quietly said the words nobody wanted to hear. "The ship will sink." Imagine that moment. You are standing inside the greatest ship humans had ever built. A ship people believed was impossible to sink. And suddenly someone tells you, this giant floating city has only a few hours left before disappearing forever beneath the ocean. At first, many passengers still refused to believe it. The lights were still glowing. The carpets were dry. The music was still playing softly inside the ship. Everything looked normal. And that made the danger even more terrifying. Because people did not panic immediately. Many passengers continued talking casually. Some laughed. Others wrapped themselves in blankets and simply watched the cold ocean. But slowly, the front of the Titanic began sinking lower into the freezing Atlantic water. Then came the order that changed everything. Prepare the lifeboats. Now here comes one of the saddest parts of the entire disaster. Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for everyone on board. There were more than 2,200 people on the ship. But lifeboats for only around half of them. Today that sounds unbelievable. But back then, many ship companies cared more about luxury and appearance than safety. Too many lifeboats would make the deck look crowded. And because Titanic was called Unsinkable, many believed lifeboats would never actually be needed. That decision would cost thousands of lives. As crew members uncovered the lifeboats, confusion spread everywhere. Passengers asked questions. What's happening? Is the ship really sinking? Should we be worried? And still, many people refused to leave the ship. Think about that for a moment. The Titanic looked warmer, brighter, and safer than the dark freezing ocean outside. Some passengers actually hesitated to enter the lifeboats. One woman reportedly asked, "Why should I leave this perfectly safe ship?" But the truth was horrifying. The Titanic was already dying. Slowly. Silently. And every minute mattered. As time passed, panic slowly began spreading across the decks. Third-class passengers suffered the most. Many families became trapped deep inside the ship's confusing hallways. Some could not find their way to the upper decks. Others struggled to understand English instructions from crew members. Children cried in fear. Parents searched desperately for loved ones. And the freezing cold air became harder and harder to survive. Meanwhile, something unbelievable was happening. The musicians on board continued playing music. Even while the ship was sinking. Imagine hearing calm music floating through the air while people slowly realized they might die tonight. That image became one of the most emotional moments in Titanic history. Music echoing across the dark Atlantic Ocean, while death moved closer every minute. Some survivors later believed the final song played by the band was Nearer, My God, to Thee, a peaceful hymn about approaching death. Imagine standing there beneath the stars, hearing that music, while the ship beneath your feet slowly sinks deeper into the ocean. By around 1:30 in the morning, the truth could no longer be hidden. Now everyone understood the Titanic was truly sinking. The front of the ship had dipped dangerously low into the freezing water. Passengers rushed desperately toward lifeboats. Crew members shouted repeatedly, "Women and children first." That order echoed again and again across the ship. Some men stepped back quietly, accepting their fate. Others desperately searched for any chance to survive. Many husbands kissed their wives goodbye for the final time. Many fathers lifted their children into lifeboats, knowing they themselves might never leave the ship alive. One of the most heartbreaking stories from that night was about an elderly couple named Ida and Isidore Strauss. They had been married for decades. Ida was offered a seat in a lifeboat. She could have survived. But she refused to leave her husband behind. She reportedly looked at him and said, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." Think about how emotional that moment must have been. Knowing death was coming, yet refusing to abandon the person you love most. The two are last seen sitting together quietly on the deck, holding hands, waiting for the end together. And while lifeboats slowly disappeared into the darkness, the Titanic continued sinking deeper into the freezing Atlantic Ocean. By around 2 a.m., The situation aboard the Titanic had become terrifying. The front of the ship was now deep underwater, and the angle of the deck became steeper every minute. Passengers struggled just to stand properly. People slipped while trying to run. Furniture slid violently across rooms. Glass shattered everywhere. And survivors later described hearing deep metallic groans coming from inside the ship. The Titanic was literally tearing itself apart. Imagine hearing those sounds in complete darkness. The world's largest ship, slowly dying beneath your feet. The lights flickered on and off. For a few moments, the ship would glow brightly again. Then darkness. Then light. Then darkness once more. Panic spread everywhere. Some people prayed. Some cried. Some jumped into the freezing ocean out of pure fear. Others stood completely still, frozen in shock. And through all of this, the band reportedly continued playing music. Calm music. Peaceful music. As chaos consumed the ship around them. By now, most lifeboats had already left. And hundreds of people still remained trapped on board. Many knew there was no escape anymore. Then suddenly, the impossible happened. A massive cracking sound exploded through the night. The Titanic began breaking apart. Imagine standing there and hearing the world's most famous ship literally splitting into pieces. The front section dragged the ship downward into the ocean. Meanwhile, the back section slowly lifted high into the air. People clung desperately to railings, ropes, and anything they could hold onto. Some survivors later said the ship stood almost straight up before disappearing. And then, at exactly 2:20 a.m., the Titanic vanished beneath the Atlantic Ocean forever. The unsinkable ship was gone. But sadly, the nightmare was only beginning. Now more than 1,500 people were trapped in the freezing water. And the Atlantic Ocean that night was brutally cold. Around -2 degrees Celsius. Cold enough to kill a person within minutes. Survivors floating in lifeboats later described hearing horrifying sounds in the darkness. Hundreds of screams. People crying for help. Begging to be saved. Calling out the names of loved ones. Praying. Imagine sitting in total darkness surrounded by those sounds. Knowing every scream belonged to a real person fighting for their life. And then slowly, one by one, the voices disappeared. Because the freezing water shut down their bodies. Many people did not actually drown. Instead, hypothermia slowly stopped their hearts. Some lifeboats were too afraid to return. The people inside feared desperate crowds would pull the boats underwater. So many survivors simply sat there helplessly, listening to people die in the darkness. One survivor later said, "The screams were the most terrible sound I ever heard." And another survivor said the silence afterward was even worse. Think about that silence. Only hours earlier, Titanic had been filled with laughter, music, conversations, and life. Now there was nothing. Just cold wind, dark water, and silence. Parents lost children. Children lost parents. Entire families disappeared forever in a single night. And somewhere beneath the ocean, the Titanic rested broken at the bottom of the Atlantic. The greatest ship of its time, gone forever. Hours later, as the sun slowly began rising over the Atlantic Ocean, a rescue ship finally arrived. The Carpathia. For the survivors floating alone in lifeboats, seeing that ship appear in the distance must have felt unreal. Some people cried in relief. Others were too shocked to even speak. One by one, survivors were pulled aboard the rescue ship. But the scene was heartbreaking. Children without parents. Wives searching desperately for husbands. Families calling out names with no answers coming back. Some survivors sat completely silent, staring into nothing. Others cried uncontrollably. Many were covered in blankets, shaking from the freezing cold and emotional shock. And perhaps the saddest part was this: many survivors carried guilt for the rest of their lives. Because they survived, while thousands of others did not. Imagine living every day remembering the screams from that night. Remembering the faces of people you could not save. Remembering the final moments of the Titanic disappearing beneath the ocean. When the Carpathia finally reached New York, huge crowds waited at the harbor. Thousands of people stood in the rain hoping for good news. Families searched survivor lists desperately. Some people found the names they prayed for. Others discovered their loved ones were gone forever. And just like that, The Titanic changed from a symbol of human greatness into one of history's greatest tragedies. But even after more than 100 years, people are still fascinated by Titanic. And maybe the reason is simple. Because Titanic was never only about a ship. It was about human beings. Their dreams. Their fears. Their courage. And their final choices. Some people sacrificed themselves so others could live. Some stayed calm even while facing death. And some never stopped helping others until the very end. The disaster also changed the world forever. After Titanic sank, major safety rules for ships were completely rewritten. Enough lifeboats became mandatory. Iceberg patrol systems improved. Emergency communication became stronger. In many ways, the tragedy saved future lives. Today, the wreck of the Titanic still rests deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Nearly 13,000 feet underwater. Silent. Dark. Frozen in time. The grand staircases are gone. The luxurious rooms are destroyed. But the story still survives. Because the ocean never erased the memories of that night. And maybe that is why Titanic still feels haunting even today. Because deep down, it reminds us how fragile human life truly is. One moment people were dancing beneath bright lights. A few hours later, they were gone forever beneath icy black water. No matter how advanced humans become, nature can still humble us in a single night. And perhaps that is the true lesson of the Titanic. Now I want you to think about something. If you were aboard the Titanic that night, what would you have done? Would you stay calm? Would you fight for survival? Or would you sacrifice your place for someone else? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this emotional journey into history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Wild with Ayatullah, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful stories like this. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next